Hi friends, today I am taking a small portion on topic monetary measures of deflationary gap. So, first of all, what do you mean by deficient demand or deflationary gap? The deficient demand refers to a situation when aggregate demand is short of aggregate supply corresponding to full employment in the economy. Now, we will discuss about the deficient demand with the help of graph. You know that deficient demand means that the supply is more and demand is less. Suppose the level of income varies from 0 to 600. The consumption expenditure increases with increase in level of income. Investment expenditure that remains same at all level of income. Now, aggregate demand is the summation of the two components, that is the consumption and income. That is 100 plus 100, which will give you 200. 150 plus 100, which will give you 250. In this way, you can calculate aggregate demand. Now, savings can be calculated from income and consumption. 0 minus 100, which will give you minus 100. 100 minus 150 is equal to minus 50. 200 minus 200 is equal to 0. In this way, calculated savings. Now, aggregate supply can be calculated from the two components, that is the consumption and savings. That is 100 minus 100 is equal to 0. 150 minus 50 is equal to 100. 200 minus 0 is equal to 200. In this way, you can calculate aggregate supply. So, aggregate supply is the total output of all goods and services when turned in the form of money. When the value of these goods and services it is expressed in terms of money, it is known as national income. That's why the figures in the national income and aggregate supplies remain same. Now, on x-axis, we will measure the income and employment, and on y-axis, we will measure consumption, investment, and savings. First of all, we will draw the aggregate supply curve. And at 0 level of income, there is 0 level of supply. At 100 level of income, there is 100 aggregate supply. At 200 level of income, there is 200 aggregate supply. And you will get a upward sloping aggregate supply curve starting from 0, making an angle of 45 degrees, showing that aggregate supply can be less than aggregate demand or equal to aggregate demand or more than aggregate demand. Now, next one is aggregate demand. It is at 0 level of income, there is 200 aggregate demand, that is autonomous consumption. At 100 level of income, there is 250 aggregate demand. And in this way, you can mark the other points and you can get the aggregate demand. Here the curve positively stops starting from Y, intersect. As you can see that the aggregate demand and aggregate supply intersect each other at point E. And these points show the underutilization of resources, because the total aggregate supply in the economy, that the point is T, and the level of income and employment in OS mean that OS is the level of income, the total supply in the economy is ST, but the total demand is SU. So, TU is the deficient demand, that means aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply is less. Aggregate demand falls short of aggregate supply at full employment level. Equilibrium level of income and employment is OR. That is, OS level of income, aggregate demand is at SU and aggregate supply is at ST. So, ST minus SU, which will give you TU. Here the TU is the deficient demand or the deflationary demand. At OS, aggregate demand equal to US, whereas aggregate supply equal to TS. This situation of deficient demand is also known as deflationary gap. Now, let's move to our topic, monetary measures to correct deficient demand or deflationary gap. Monetary policy. So, monetary policy is the range of interest charged by the central bank on the borrowings. Monetary policy is the policy of the central bank of a country to control credit and money supply. The aim of monetary policy in times of deficient demand is to cause an increase in investment expenditure by firms. The measures which can be adopted by the central bank are broadly classified into two groups, that is, the quantitative methods and the qualitative methods. Quantitative methods. These methods aim at regulating the volume of credit. These include the following: reduction in the legal reserve ratio, bank rate, open market operation, variable reserve ratio. The first one, reduction in the legal reserve ratio. It is a summation of CRR and SLR. Banks cannot use the whole of deposit for lending. Suppose the SBI is having a total deposit of rupees 1000 with it, and the SBI cannot use this whole deposit for the credit creation. And here the credit creation means when the commercial banks lend this money to the firms or the household for any productive purposes. Here the banks keep a certain minimum percentage of their deposits as cash reserve with the central bank by themselves, which is legally compulsory for the banks. And this percentage is called legal reserve ratio. LRR is fixed by the central bank. The central bank lowers the LRR, which enables the commercial banks to create more credit. A reduction in the LRR releases money that was earlier required to keep as a reserve either with the central bank or with the banks. This will give more money in the hands of commercial banks to lend more. As a result, aggregate demand increases. And the second one is bank rate. Bank rate means when you people borrowed money from the banks and the bank charged a rate of interest. That lending, the rate of interest is known as bank rate. Suppose I have taken a loan of rupees 1000 from a bank and wants to charge 3% interest on this 1000 rupees loan. So, when I will return this loan to the bank, I will pay 1030 rupees to the bank. So, this 30 rupees is known as bank rate. So now, the central bank decides the rate to lend to the commercial banks, that is known as bank rate. The commercial bank decides the rate to tend to lend to the public, that is base rate. Bank rate is the rate of interest at which the central bank gives short-term loans to member banks. An increase in the bank rate means that the Reserve Bank will charge higher interest from the borrower banker. As a result, the banks will begin to charge higher interest rate from their borrowers. Money will have a contractionary effect on economy, as the investors will not like to borrow at higher rate of interest. This would lead to a decrease in consumption as well as investment expenditure. And the third one is open market operations. Open market operation refers to the sale and purchase of the government securities by the Reserve Bank to the public, including banks. When the Reserve Bank sells these securities to the commercial banks, Reserve Bank receives payments from commercial banks in cash. To that extent, commercial banks' ability to create credit is restricted, which will have a contractionary effect on economy. Opposite, when the central bank buys government securities from the commercial banks by paying them in cash to increase their cash stock and lending capacity. When the central bank purchases securities from the people, it makes cash payments to them. The sellers of these securities deposit this money in banks. Thus, deposits with commercial banks increase, which in turn raises their lending power. This encourages lending and aggregate demand. In this, it is a commercial bank will purchase the securities, means no people are in hands of commercial banks and money. It is in hands of central bank, that is Reserve Bank. Now, there is a contraction of money supply in the economy, and commercial bank are having lesser money to lend to the people. In order to control the demand of the lending, the commercial bank will charge higher rate of interest on lendings. So these are known as the open market operations. And the next one, variable reserve ratio. First one is the cash reserve ratio, that is CRR. It refers to that proportion of their time and demand deposits that commercial banks are required to keep in cash with the Reserve Bank of India. Cash reserve ratio. Cash reserve ratio refers to that proportion of their time and demand deposits that commercial banks are required to keep in cash with the Reserve Bank of India. And here the time deposits means the fixed deposits, and the demand deposits means saving amounts or current accounts. So suppose this year the State Bank of India, that is the commercial bank, in the State Bank of India people deposits $1,000. So the total deposit with the State Bank of India for the year 2020 is $1,000. Now, this full deposits the commercial bank can use for the lending purposes, that is credit creation purposes. Now, what the State Bank will do? The State Bank will deposit or maintain 5% as the CRR with the RBI. Then RBI from this deposit, that is deposit by the State Bank of India, will help to the State Bank in case of any kind of emergency, but the commercial bank will not get any kind of interest on such deposits to the RBI. Now the current CRR is 3%. It means according to 3%, the commercial bank will deposit 3% of CRR with the RBI, that is the total deposit of $1,000. The commercial bank will deposit $30 if the CRR is set by the RBI is 3%. Statutory liquidity ratio, SLR. It refers to the proportion of their time and demand deposits that commercial banks are required to keep with themselves as a liquid assets. So here, every scheduled commercial bank in India is required to maintain a minimum proportion of their net demand and time liability as liquid assets in the form of cash or in gold value at a price not exceeding the current market price. Maximum limit of SLR is 40%. It means 40% of total deposit, that is with the commercial banks, can maintain as a liquid asset with them. An increase in either of these rates reduces the availability of credit in the economy and contractionary effect on the economy and vice versa.
Next one is repo rate, means repurchase rate. Repo rate is a rate of interest charged by RBI when it lends money to the commercial banks for a very short period. So repo rate in India right now is 4.40%. Increase in repo rate has adverse effect on the aggregate demand because with the increased repo rate means that with the lesser money it is in the hands of commercial bank, or you can say that commercial bank has to pay high rate of interest for lending to the RBI. With this commercial bank with lesser money can create lesser credit in the economy and will cut the employment level, investment level and aggregate demand.
Next one is reverse repo rate. It is a rate of interest which is paid by the RBI to commercial banks when they keep the surplus liquidity with it. That means the commercial bank can deposit their either money to the RBI and RBI gives the high rate of interest to the commercial banks and commercial banks can enjoy the profit in this way. A rise in repo rate results is an increase in the cost of fund for commercial banks. The banks passes on this burden to the borrowers. All interest rates go up in the economy. Repo rates are raised to check inflation in the economy. A fall in the repo rate makes the loan cheaper and hence it is an instrument to stimulate investment and growth in the economy. When repo rate is increased, reverse repo rate also increased and vice versa. The next one, moral persuasion or suasion. The central bank may simply advise commercial banks either to expand or contract the value of credit being created by them. This advice of central bank is generally accepted and followed up by other commercial banks. So, for moral persuasion in case of deficient demand, central bank lowers the lending rate to the commercial bank and for commercial bank also lowers the lending rate to the borrowers. During deficient demand, the central bank requests or advises the commercial banks to encourage credit and vice versa. The next one, direct action. The central bank may also resort to direct action. Direct action refers to all the controls and directions which a central bank may enforce on commercial banks to regulate lending and investment activities. Next one, selective credit control. The central bank gives direction to the bank to give credit for certain purposes to particular sectors. During deficient demand, credit for speculative purposes, here speculative purposes means holding purposes, is withdrawn and credit for productive purpose is encouraged. Before giving a loan to borrowers, the banks will ask the purpose for loan. If the purpose is speculative like holding, if anybody is knowing that in future that the demand for woolen clothes will increase and he or she wants to pour the wool at the current time period, for that he wants to borrow from the banks and the bank will deny for these purposes if any firm wants to borrow for investment in the bank. So the employment can be generated in the economy, then the bank will advance loans to the firms. So friends, hope you are understood the topic. Today we have covered the topic, the key terms like bank rate, cash reserve ratio that is CRR, statutory liquidity ratio that is SLR, repo rate, reverse repo rate, and the remedial measures to correct deficient demand.